Joel Taylor, are you just going to reveal the legit trailer or are you going to show the full showcase? I'm going to be streaming the whole live stream, so stay tuned to watch it. The FNAF Security Breach trailer might be at the start or it might be at the end, we don't know. That's why I'm streaming the whole thing. Once I've streamed it all, I'm going to add it all together so it all goes
better slightly at ray tracing, and this test proves it. But again,
so
there's more to discuss around the APIs of construction.
I don't exactly know if it is in this, but Dockle and all streaming saying that it's in this, so I'm just going with what they're saying, so if it's in it, we'll see it, hopefully.
Again, those reflections factored in, spinning the camera around in photo mode in the exact same spot. Then the PS5 is slightly faster than the 2070 Super, and the Series X is obviously faster than them both. So it does give you a good example of just how good these consoles are already at doing ray traced reflections across multi-platform titles like this. Worth it though in comparison to the other modes, higher frame rates and much faster input times. And obviously on the S, this is all you've got. Well, it will depend on your preference. Once ray tracing is off, the game defaults to screen space reflections, which often seem more stochastic than the ray trace ones do, and they do not benefit as much from that TAA. In action though, it can be harder to notice the loss, with only certain points in the game which lack those decent cube maps to fall back on. These can stand out at times. Now instead the game uses assigned distance fields, almost like a point cloud approximation of the surrounding geometry, and these blend with the SSR reflections on rougher marble floors or brushed metal doors. And they actually come close enough to convince. But when you need to check your hair and lippy, they do not hold a candle to ray tracing, obviously. And again though, like Quantum Break-like combat, it really benefits from that 16 millisecond frame cost reduction, as do the input times. That 60 mode feels so much better than ray tracing mode, and at times I actually struggle to play over the 60 mode, as it may or may not affect you though. This might be different for you personally, but for me I definitely felt the difference. Which nicely brings us into performance and how all versions stack up. Now as noted, the last gen versions target the same 30 FPS the ray trace mode does, but with lesser effects and no ray tracing. The new ray tracing mode on both consoles is vastly better and cleaner, if not that much better on input times, but holding that 33 millisecond frame time pretty much all the time on the PS5, and it does that most of the time on the Series X, except there are those deltas coming from those streaming stutters when you move into new sector points rather than in gameplay, although sometimes it can happen as you're moving around the combat area. Now this is obviously largely helped by the PS5's I/O construction. It's alleviated workloads away from the CPU and that SSD. Something else the PS5 boost is almost half the install size thanks to Oodle texture compression. It only takes 25 gigabytes on your PS5 versus 42 gigabytes on both Xbox machines. Now all versions include the DLC pack as well, and this translates to a smaller footprint, hardly any stutters at all, or practically none, with minor ones, but they can crop up more often than I would like on the Xbox, along with slightly faster loading times on the Xbox Series X. Again, minor, but every little help. But as boring as that 30 FPS mode is from an analysis perspective, it's great news for us as we play. You do get these stutters in the 30 mode and the 60 mode on the Series X, and I'll touch on what I think is happening there in a minute. But the 60 FPS mode has slightly more to discuss, not least of which is that Series S version. The game itself targets 60 FPS, but again it's locked at 1600 by 900, and it does appear to have some reductions in some of the textures and details and filtering. Not a massive amount, but you can certainly notice it on in certain parts when you're comparing them side by side. You can also notice the lower resolution, so it highlights the shimmer, the breakup, and that stochastic noise can get a little bit noisy at certain points, specifically at that lower resolution. On a 4K screen it stands out much more than a 1080p one, but just be aware. But generally it holds on to that 60 FPS very, very well. You can run through areas, and occasionally the stuttering is pretty much identical to the Series X, sometimes worse, sometimes better, but it's really synonymous of the entire game engine running on the hardware and how it's been constructed. The Series S is a pretty consistent 60. There are points when you can have long views, lots of geometry draw and alpha effects. That can then bring that frame rate down to a consistent 40 at some of the heavier points you can see on screen, but it never really prolongs for too long, and generally you're somewhere in those mid-50s, so it still feels very fast, very smooth and very consistent. And overall, it's a decent rendition of the game, minus those ray trace options, but it still has that most important for me, that 60 FPS mode. Moving into the Series X and the PS5, the comparison here again is pretty close. They largely dip occasionally, very minor 33 millisecond skips into the next refresh cycle when explosions happen close on, or physics collide, or objects are very heavy in the screen, and that frustum is filled with effects, alphas and transparencies. That can cause a couple of dips down, but they're not that far apart in this fully rasterized mode. Maybe ever so slightly better to the Series X, but you wouldn't notice it outside this comparison. The unfortunate thing, flipping the ray tracing test on its head, is there is consistent stutters and jitters at points throughout the game. Again, consistent in when you traverse the game, when you run through it. Most of the combat sections, once they're loaded in, stay consistent at that 60 FPS. When you're travelling through areas, you can get these stutters you can see here, and that can bring the frame rate down to somewhere into the low 40s. It can be very brief and it judders as it goes through those sections, and again, this can be frustrating at times if you sometimes get it compounded on top of each other, and you feel it far more often than these 1 or 2 frame drops throughout combat. So it is the worst performing title because of the fact it dips down in these levels, which is a shame. But why is it doing this? Now, it's not because of that magic SSD, it's not because of all of those things that I just spoke about in terms of the I/O construction specifically. Now, what I think it is an answer we can find over on the PC version. The Northlight engine is a very impressive engine. It's almost a perfect technical showcase of all the things the tech engineers want to push into a title. Ray trace reflections, huge physics, destruction, fluid-based simulation on alpha effects, so many particles and much more going on, that actually it's still a CPU-bound title often, specifically in those ray tracing modes, because that puts a much higher overhead on the CPU, but also in the game itself. It can be bound to one single thread. Not unknown, many titles are multi-threaded, but you have a worker thread that owns the rest of the game engine. And here on PC, you can see on my Ryzen 2700, just defaulting here to 3300, you can see it can max out 100% at times on one single thread. Now, unless Remedy have made drastic changes to this construction and single-threaded limitation, which I highly doubt in the new Northlight release here, then it's probably an issue that carries over to the console versions. But because of that PS5's construction and the fact that pretty much everything to do with moving data in and out of load of RAM is actually taken away from the CPU, in addition to the API being slightly lighter on that console than the DirectX version on Xbox, then likely these issues are not hitting it where they are hitting it on the Series X and the Series S. Hence, we get these brief but occasional stutters that crop up when things are instantiated into RAM, objects are drawn in, areas are closed off for kill rooms, and that's a standard practice of engines to keep data moving freely in and out of RAM, and there is a cost to that. Now, bearing in mind that when you use ray tracing, that also increases the cost of the CPU. So that BVH grid, that construction of objects that are in different boxes that are then scanned when the ray tracing goes out from the screen, all of this has a factor on the game. So if we take the comparison earlier on the photo mode, that had no load on the game at all, just general ray tracing and rasterization loads, perfect GPU test. And this is the thing about the game, it's a great example of how these two consoles actually differ and strengthen in different areas. You can lose 16, maybe 20% in that ray trace modes on the PS5, but you can lose exactly the same 16-20% in these points when it's loading data in and out in combat. And it's quite refreshing to see a game that enables us to get a good view into the hardware and how it's constructed, But generally, that 60 FPS mode on all consoles is the one that I would choose. I'm not a big fan of the art style. I think it's a bit dull. I don't think it utilises the ray trace reflections very well, and it's one of the reasons why I wouldn't recommend the ray trace reflections for me, because I don't think they stand out unless you're staring into the screen and looking at them. But if you are a fan, I think there's a secret third option here for Remedy to just turn on. Based on our tests previously between the consoles and PC, I think a 1080-60 mode would be perfectly capable on both machines, with likely a very similar performance metric to that rasterization mode. But if you want to run around, shoot things, pick objects up, and then check your lippy, it might be the perfect compromise to get the most out of Control. If you like this and these deep dives into this performance analysis across consoles and that powerful PC, then obviously keep it IGN, and I'll catch you on the next one.
Right, here we go. Face cam off, please, you know.
There's some very unexpected developments in your future. Shocking events that will change the course of your life.
That last part might have been a hair dramatic, but there's lots of awesome updates and additions coming to the Crash Bandicoot 4 It's About Time experience on PlayStation 5. Hey everyone, I'm Lou Studdard, creative producer at Toys for Bob. I'm here to give you the feature rundown on Crash Bandicoot 4 on PS5. That includes 4K at 60 frames per second, adaptive triggers, 3D audio, and more.
Let's make this fun.
Picking up where Crash Bandicoot Warp left off, in Crash Bandicoot 4 It's About Time, we find the evil masterminds Neo-Cortex and Dr. Entropy escaping a once-thought inescapable interdimensional prison, leaving giant holes in the universe. What follows is a mind-bending adventure for Crash and his marsupial pals. We designed Crash Bandicoot 4 to leap off your screen, brimming with bold, vibrant environments and characters. Crash Bandicoot has always looked pretty suave, but wait until you see him spinning heads in native 4K at 60 frames per second. With the weight of the universe on your shoulders, and probably some errands to run, there's little time to wait on loading screens. The DualSense wireless controllers bring adaptive triggers to your fingertips, so you can feel the blast of Neo-Cortex's DNA-changing ray gun, or feel the grip when you grapple Atana's hookshot. Hold on tight when you feel the boost of Crash's jetboard, and really feel the suck when you vacuum his Dingo Dial. Looking to get fully immersed in the Crash Bandicoot universe? Crank it up to 11 and take your audio into an all-new dimension with enhanced 3D audio. Achieving the infamous 106% completion is the sign of a true Bandicoot master. But should our genetically mutated marsupial lose his way, leverage PlayStation 5 activity cards to track your progress and hit your goals for things like time trials, flashback levels, and boss fights. I bet Entropy wishes he had that. Even bring your incomplete save over from the PlayStation 4 and use the activity cards to get to 106%. Oh, and one more thing. If you own the PS4 version of the game, an upgrade option is available. Check out the PlayStation blog for full details. Whether it's your first playthrough or your 100th, there's no better time to experience Crash Bandicoot 4 It's About Time on PlayStation 5.
Welcome back, Crash. The gang's all here on today's new edition of State of Play. We've got some great updates lined up for you. First, let's check out the latest on an eagerly anticipated game coming to the PS5 console this spring from PlayStation Studios.
Hey everyone, we at Housemarque are excited to give you this sneak peek at Returnal. In Returnal, you will play as Celine, an Astra scout, who crash lands on an alien planet, Atropos, after receiving a mysterious signal, White Shadow. Players will explore this inscrutable, dark planet in search for answers and unfold mysteries, which may point to a larger force at play. Dashing and quickly maneuvering your way above and around enemies is key to survival in Returnal. With the large variety of enemies and the vast number of unique movesets each possess, combat situations prove challenging no matter what the circumstances are. Death is only the beginning. Every time you die and restart, the world will change. The map will be different, enemies will appear in new locations and in differing numbers, so you have to think fast and adapt. Here you can see the use of the lightning alt-fire, which is great for crowd control. This is one of many alt-fires that you can acquire in the game. You will stumble across mysterious devices that can grant rewards to the player. These will vary from weapons, consumables, and upgrades, and they can completely change your playstyle and make each cycle feel unique. Besides the intense combat, Returnal also has a deep and engaging narrative. We allow players to piece together the puzzle that is the story of Celine, as they venture deeper and deeper into Atropos and into her personal nightmare.
That can't be here.
I think I am reliving my memories in that house, but not fully. They're corroded. Some parts are missing, others seem manufactured. But I can remember the torment, feeling like I was losing my mind. There's no comfort here. No safe space.
Exactly as I left it.
Returnal lands on April 30th, and it's developed by the talented team at Housemarque. Next, let's take a closer look at a high-impact new PS4 game called Knockout City.
Hi, I'm Josh from Bellin Studios. We're an indie developer based in upstate New York, and we recently announced Knockout City, a team-based multiplayer action game for PS4 where rival crews settle their scores with epic dodgeball battles. Knockout City is easy to pick up and play, but there's a lot of depth here for those who've got the skills. In our 1v1 face-off mode, you'll go head-to-head in a constantly shrinking battleground, relying on your reflexes and abilities to knock out an opponent. A well-timed catch powers up the ball, making it easier to land a hit. Use trick shots to lob a ball over a ledge or hook it around a corner. Fake a throw to mess up your opponent's timing and knock them out before they can recover. When you're in a tough spot with a ball flying your way, a last-second dodge is the difference between getting knocked out and staying in the fight. Keep your wits about you and outplay your opponent to bring home a win. Let's jump into Team KO, our 3v3 mode. Teamwork makes the dream work in Knockout City. If your crew is outmatched, a well-coordinated team can still dominate. We're playing in Back Alley Brawl, a new map that you'll find in our upcoming crossplay beta. The special ball for this match is the Sniper Ball, which locks onto targets from far across the map and wham! You can take them out before they have a chance to react. Beyond special balls, each map features a unique mechanic. In Back Alley Brawl, you can hop into a tube and make a quick getaway, or use them to sneak up on your opponents. Caught empty-handed? You can literally become the ball, a new weapon for your teammate. Or risk it all. Charge up a teammate, launch them high into the air with an ultimate throw, and they'll land in a huge instant KO explosion. The team here at Bellin has been obsessed with building this world over the last 4 years. Knockout City is coming out May 21st, and we'd love your help in our final stretch of development. Rally your crew and sign up for our crossplay beta at knockoutcity.com to play early on PlayStation. See you soon, brawlers.
Time for something new. Here's your first look at an upcoming PS5 game from the team at Slowclap. the debut of Sifu, coming to the PS5 console
Actually
later
looks
this
no
year.
bad.
Now let's get an update on Solar Ash, an epic new PS5 adventure from Heart Machine.
I'll be right back, guys. I'm going to record this in case FNAF comes and I'm away.
Hey everyone, I'm Alex Preston, creative director of Heart Machine. You might know us as the team behind Hyperlight Drifter. Today, I'm here to show you the first peek at gameplay for our new title, Solar Ash. Solar Ash is a huge, stylish 3D platformer focused on speed, movement, and fluidity. The game is set inside a giant black hole known as the Ultra Void, which has been consuming everything in its path. You play as Ray, a daring Void Runner who has decided to venture into this terrifying anomaly as a last-ditch effort to save her homeworld. Ray is extremely agile, able to speed across the world with abilities akin to skating. On the ashen clouds, she can quickly cover great distances in our huge world. At its core, Solar Ash is a game about movement, and Ray has everything she needs to float through the dangerous and unique world. As you journey to save your
I'm
planet,
back.
you'll find yourself face to face with grotesque, violent creatures. Our combat system is simple.
When
and
FNAF
fast,
comes on, I'm going to be muting my
built to
mic.
empower players and encourage love. As you explore the Ultra Void, enemy encounters will scale to greater and greater sizes. Some of these creatures require speed and precise timing. Ray will eventually need to face the massive sentinels of this void. Wretched, starved beasts that hold the key to her quest. Solar Ash is Heart Machine's vision of the adventure platformer. The giant spaces, the feel of movement, the flow of combat, and the high-stakes battles atop enormous beasts all come together to bring players something we think is incredibly unique, and more importantly, fun. This game is a labor of love for everyone on the Heart Machine team. We're excited to bring Solar Ash to PS5 and PS4 later this year.
If you're a fan of scary games, this next one is for you.
Five Nights at Freddy's, please be Five Nights at Freddy's.
When I first found you, you were nothing. You were small, pathetic. But now, you are more. Are you ready?
Gregory, we can get you out of here. You and me together. They won't stop hunting you. None of them will stop hunting you. We have to get you out by morning.
Do as I say. You will bring me what I want. And if you fail me, then you will. Both of you burn!
There is more going on here than you realize.
That was a chilling new look at Five Nights at Freddy's security breach. Up next, let's take a tour of Oddworld Soulstorm.
Hi, I'm Lauren Lanning, Creative Director at Oddworld Inhabitants. Today, I'm going to take you on a brief tour of our newest game, Oddworld Soulstorm.
They've always known you would come. Do you know why you have?
In Soulstorm, you reprise the role of Abe, accidental hero turned unlikely leader of an emerging revolution, as you do battle through weird and wonderful environments in an effort to escape the all-powerful and eternally greedy Gluckins. We really wanted to bring this world to life with what we call 2.9D platforming, which adds much more depth and immersion for the player. This sense of connection is also reinforced through the use of the DualSense's haptic feedback, as you'll now be able to feel Abe's heartbeat in high alert and suspenseful situations. There are well over 1,000 fellow Mudokons that you must try to save along the way. But they are far more than helpless workers looking to be saved. When used effectively, you'll be able to solve puzzles, harness their combined energy, and be given the tools they need to fight alongside you. And there will be times when the extra hands will be needed as you face off against an array of heavily armed enemies that will stop at nothing to find and end Abe once and for all. In order to stand a chance against this much larger threat, we gave Abe the ability to scavenge, loot, and pickpocket items from his surroundings and use them to craft an impressive arsenal of his own that he can share with others. You can also play as a non-lethal pacifist or an agent of chaos. We wanted you to have the choice. But there is one iconic ability for our shamanic protagonist, Possession. This mystical power allows you to take control of your foes and use their strengths and weapons against them, or use them to gain access to paths still ahead. The Oddworld universe is a diverse place, and this means that there are some environments and situations that require a little more thought, patience, and stealth. You'll find dark and dangerous caves, heavily guarded industrial sites, and ancient forgotten lands. Here, we've built lots of opportunities for you to test your skills and find different ways to handle things. It won't be easy. If being hunted by an army backed by a shady and wealthy organization isn't bad enough, there are also more dangers in the forms of natural obstacles, ancient traps, trials against swarming dark creatures, and industrial hazards that must be dodged, crossed, and avoided. Ultimately, Abe's journey is one of hope, freedom, and truth. There's a rich and engaging narrative to discover in a world full of lies, and we've been able to bring our characters to life like never before. In true Oddworld fashion, your actions in-game will decide the fate of Abe and all those you manage to liberate along the way, and we can't wait to see what you will do.
That was the latest on Oddworld Soulstorm. And here's some exciting news. Active PlayStation Plus members will get the PS5 version for no extra cost, starting in April. Moving on, it's time to catch up with Kena Bridge of Spirits, a gorgeous new adventure we last saw in the June PS5 showcase.
The rats seem quite fond of you. They're usually timid. Something tells me you did not come to our village looking for forest creatures.
Hello, Spirit. I seek passage to the Sacred Mountain Shrine.
village is bound to the shrine's energy. But that power faded long ago. Trapped spirits linger here, tangled in the tragedies of our past. We must help these spirits if we wish to reach the mountain shrine.
It's okay. You have to go now. This land can be big, but you cannot stay here, Spirit. You must move on.